everyone, Foxyfern here, and welcome back to our Walk Cycle Animation Workshop. This is the progress we have thus far. As you can see, it's looking okay if you ignore everything from below the hips, or sorry, above the hips. It's looking alright. Obviously, she's still pretty stiff in her upper torso, aside from that weird thing that's happening that the rig is automatically doing. But I'm pretty happy with where her feet and legs are for the moment. You know, it's always a possibility that we're going to touch things up in the end, but for now, I think we are ready to move on to her upper torso. So for starters, I do believe we have put a pose on her chest, yes. So this was back when we were just doing the passing poses in our first video, and that's part of why she's looking a little bit wobbly like that, because she's going side to side like, hey guys, I'm cool, but she's not, you know, going this direction, since in the passing pose she was always square on. So that's probably the first thing we're going to add here, is to make sure she's got the correct twist motion going. So generally in a walk cycle, everybody's different and everybody walks slightly differently, but the way we're going to do it in this walk cycle is that generally people's torso arrives slightly before their hips, because you're kind of like, yes, your legs are what carry you there, but you're, you know, leading with your head and everything follows down below that. So we are going to have her Y rotation arrive just a bit before her hip rotation does. So we'll start out pretty simple. Honestly, like the torso animation, in my opinion, is much easier than the legs and feet, because we're not worried about things being planted on the ground. So let's see here. We've got her leg coming forward, and you know what we could do here is, let's make sure these are the same rotation. Yep, Y rotation and Y rotation. And if you really want to just like kind of cheat and make it a little easier, is we'll just move these keys to, like, I don't know, we'll start with a frame before where her hips arrive, and then we want this to go the opposite direction. That's probably a little too much, but we'll just take this entire graph and move it up there. So already we've got her now rotating a bit this way when her left leg comes forward, and then we'll do a little bit more back the other way when her right leg comes forward. Now, another thing that your upper torso is doing, granted it's like moving in all three axes all the time because we're all living in a three-dimensional world, but one thing I like to do is give it some variance with the up and down. Like, you could just go like this and that would be okay and it would work and it would be fine for a walk cycle, but one thing you might notice when somebody is walking is, as their arm swings forward, their shoulder is actually dropping. Let me just pull this video reference over here for you and show you what I mean. This one's in slow motion, and this is what I'm talking about with using slow motion video reference. Like, you don't want it to be your only reference, but it's really great for discovering all these little nuances. So if we take a look at this, we can see that as her arm comes, whoops, oh my gosh, QuickTime. You can kind of see here, as her right arm is coming forward, her shoulder drops a little, and there's this angle here. Yes, we do have a slight camera angle, but you can compare it to when her shoulder comes back. It is now ever so slightly up higher. So it's kind of making this circle. This is very exaggerated, but it's not just going like this. You want to incorporate a big circular or oval motion here. So we'll put that in our chest rotation here. And this is, like I said before, this is the first time I'm really animating with this character, and she's kind of already having some unexpected motions, and I might have to go in and tweak some of this, or figure out if she's like on, yeah, she's on an IK spine here. I might, she's got kind of like this combo thing going on where her spine is both IK and FK. So this will be an interesting thing to figure out here, but we'll get through that together. All right, so we should kind of already have it from doing our passing pose before, but yeah, as you can see here, her shoulder is lower, and then it'll come higher as her arm starts to come back. And look at that. Wow, we already have it in there. That's the importance of good posing. I totally wasn't even thinking about the whole circular motion when we were posing out the passing position, but I was thinking about all of the angles in the shoulders and the hips and where the arm would be on its way back versus on its way forward and all that kind of thing. So if you set up your animation with good posing, it's going to make things easier in the long run, because I could have had a situation where, oh shoot, I did that wrong and now I have to go back and fix it. But hey, it's already there. Well, in that case, we'll do the bread and butter of the upper body with the animation and animate the arms. Ooh, that's interesting. Okay, this is not ideally how I would want her rotations to be on her arms. What I would expect is for us to have an axis that was in line with her arm here. So that's gonna make it tricky. Yeah, see, as you can see, I would like to have an axis like this. Oh boy, so then we might be running into some gimbal lock issues. What do her clavicles look like? Oh, they're okay, but let's see what happens if we change our rotation order over here. What do I usually like to animate in? I'm trying to think. X, Z, Y. Oh, yeah, that doesn't matter. I think this is just the way. Oh, okay. Well, I was gonna say, oh, we have, aha. I was like, it's not letting me change the rotation order. It's got a little drop down box here. Is that what I want? I think that is better for me, yes, because then when her arm raises up, then we can rotate it. Yes, perfect. Okay, so ZXY is what I personally like to rotate arms in, assuming the rig was set up similarly, but, you know, it's a matter of personal preference. But that is what I'm going to settle on here, and we'll just change this one as well. Gonna delete our keys first so we don't have that changing on us. That's really interesting. I've never worked with a rig that will allow you to change it in the channel box. Huh. And it shouldn't really mess up our animations. If you had a lot of work done already on your animation, when you go to change the rotation order, it can really like change it up a lot. But since we really only had like 2 keys on our animations here, it's not that big of a deal. So first of all, we want to animate her clavicles. Don't forget the clavicles. They're a very important part of making your character feel alive. But as I said previously, we did actually pay attention to this in our posing. So hopefully they are at a place where we want them to be. We're going to want them to be back farther than they go right now. So let's say here, we're going to go back a little more, and then in our front pose, it's going to arrive a little before our feet, and we'll have it come all the way. I tend to like to push things kind of far to begin with, and then if we have to tone it back later, that's totally fine, but this might be too far once we get all of the shoulder animations down. She kind of looks like a monkey right now, just using her floppy arms there. And that is because her arms are parented to mane, which again was my choice. What you could do if you really wanted the arms to follow her body is, we'll just delete that key there. We could change it to, I think shoulder would be where, yeah, so Here it's just going to follow her clavicle as you would expect. But the reason why I don't personally usually animate that way is because if I did want to come back in here and add some clavicle motion, if I decided I wasn't doing enough, or if I just, you know, want to give the character a shrug or something, then you run into issues where you're going to have to do this, and then you're going to counter animate the arm, and then you're going to get all sorts of wonky gimbal locks. So in general, unless the character's like doing a flip or some really drastic motion, I like to put the shoulder space on whatever it's like. In this case, it's main. You could also do world or chest. If you put it on chest, that will allow you to, I imagine she's just going to follow. Whoops, maybe not that control. Just gonna, yeah, so it's gonna follow the chest, but then it won't follow the clavicle. So that actually isn't a terrible option either. But for now, I just want to have full control on that, so we're going to set that back to main. All right, so her arm is going to come all the way forward here. This seems like a fairly good spot, like so. Yeah, because she's walking kind of casually. And then her back pose will be about here. Her arm's not going to go back as far as it comes forward, so you definitely don't want to do like a copy paste and change to negative versus positive thing, because as you can see here, we've got 22 forward and negative 16 in the back. But if I made this go all the way to negative 22, that's just like a little too far. Let me pull over this video reference again. As you can see, like her arms come much more forward than they do back. And part of that is helped by the overlapping motion from the elbow down, which we will also incorporate, since your elbow does not go past this point, but it, you know, can go all the way up here. So, but yeah, we don't want it to go quite that far. I maybe even had it too far as it was. Make sure our curves are smoothed out here. There you go. So yeah, I think we're going to be toning down this motion here in her chest, because that's quite extreme. But let's go ahead and add in some more animation to her elbow here. She doesn't quite come back straight all the way. We don't want it to be like crazy locked out, but fairly straight. And then when she comes forward, as the arm starts to come back, that's when we're going to have our most bent spot here. Whoops, that was maybe a little too much. So pretty close to what I had set up for our passing pose, but just sometimes make small adjustments after you start to see how it's going. All right, so another thing to think about is your arm doesn't just come straight forward like this. Your arm will kind of ever so slightly like cross over in front of your body, because you are turning your torso, and then it will change directions as it goes back. So let's take care of that as well. So when it comes forward here, whoops, all right, now this is a case where sometimes your rotations can be weird because you're animating in gimbal. I'm going to rotate in local for this, and we just want to watch our curves and make sure nothing super crazy is going to happen. Because you'll see it's going to key on all three axes, which is less than ideal, but we'll just make sure to go through and clean those up. Yeah, so let's just make this curve nice here. That one's not too bad. I think we can just delete that. Oh, and then our Y. All right, why is our Y so messed up here? All right, so she wants to rotate in. Yes, okay, so we are experiencing some clipping here now. So we want her arm to come out a little bit more than that. And then it'll go behind her like this when her arm is at the furthest back position. Just clean these all up here. It's hard to tell, but it seems like there might be a gimbal issue here. So let's do a quick play blast and see it in full speed. Yeah, it's a little weird, a little wonky here. You can see a little bit of jitter in her arm, and that's just going to be a gimbal issue. But once again, that's something we're going to have to clean up later on. It looks pretty good from the side, though. Obviously, we haven't rotated her wrist yet, but that'll be our next step. So basically, I'm just going to do the same thing to the wrist, thinking about all 3 axes, and her hand is going to rotate in a little as it comes forward, and then it'll, oops, maybe I should make sure you guys can see my camera. It'll rotate in like so as she's got her arm forward, and then slightly rotate out as it comes back. And then, of course, we've got a little bit of this floppy secondary action here, but we don't want to go too crazy on that. So I'm just going to go ahead and give this a quick treatment and probably do some little touch-ups to what we've already done here. Alright, welcome back. I think this is shaping up pretty okay. There's still a little bit of like hitching going on with this arm, I'm afraid, due to some gimbal issues, but that's something that I want to address in our final polish up phase. But for now, I think it's at a pretty good place that we can go ahead and apply this to the left arm. And as you'll notice, I have not yet animated the fingers outside of that main pose, which is something I also plan on doing in the polish stage. And that will really help add to the feeling of her being relaxed and give that some additional overlapping motion. You may have noticed in my time lapse that I did a little bit of adjustments to her torso. I found that this control here, whoops, let's stop view. This control in the middle, this spine IK2 control, was really getting pushed. Like, I think this was zeroed out, and you can see, yeah, so this is like really kind of what's giving her this like ridiculous curve, which is great if that's what you're going for, but that's not what I wanted. So all I did was I just put 2 keyframes on this control at both extremes to kind of straighten things out a little. And obviously she's still got that hip sway going on, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. I just didn't want this like ridiculousness happening here. The other thing I did was I made the Z rotation happen on this spine FK3 control instead of the IK control. I realized that I think I do like the Y rotation on this control But again, the Z rotation was just kind of giving her some weird extra rotation, whereas this was like a little more centralized. And so I liked the rotation on that control just a little better. All right, so the last thing I want to do in this video, aside from copying over the animation to the other arm, is let's get this head figured out here. So with a walk cycle, there's not going to be like a huge amount of motion. I mean, really any walk, run, sprint, because as a human, we are always trying to stabilize our view, which means our bodies are naturally going to try and make our heads stay as still as possible. But I'm sure many of you have been bothered by the fact that right now she kind of looks like she's got a chicken neck here. She's doing a little bit of like body isolation, and I want to fix that. And now one thing you could do, again, this is a personal preference thing, but I believe her head control right now is going to be set to world, or rather it's just a parent control here. Yeah, so I guess one is going to be she's it's parented to what? Oh, I meant to say delete, not paste. One is going to be it's parented to the neck, which means anytime you rotate the neck, it's gonna follow along, whereas if it's parented to the world space or whatever the 0 is, it's going to try and stay focused, so you could move like that, right? So I'm sure we'll notice if we do this, yeah, now her head is just kind of whoa, which, you know, once again, maybe that's something you're going for, right? But in my case, I tend to prefer to animate in the global space. I just feel like that gives me more control. But I don't want her head going side to side like it is right now. So we're just going to straighten this out from the neck and make her head kind of stay on this grid line here. Yeah, see, that's really all it took. I probably should have done that sooner because it's probably irritating the crap out of you guys. But yeah, so now her head looks pretty normal. She looks a little stiff, and we're going to fix that right now. But at least she's not doing the weird side-to-side thing. So we are going to probably exaggerate this a little more than how a real person would walk, but for starters, we're going to give her a little bit of up and down motion in her head. So as she's coming down here, that's when we want her chin to be at its highest point. And then when her body is on its way up, that's when it will be at its lowest point. And then that's going to happen twice in this cycle. And it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, sometimes if you offset it a little bit, it'll make it feel a little more organic. Okay, that is way too much. So we'll fix that. I don't even need a play blast to tell you that. That's probably a little better. Still maybe slightly too much. And the other thing I want to do is just have like a tiny little bit of side to side. So we'll give her some Y rotation. I don't know that I'm going to do much Z, maybe just a smidge, just to give it that extra little organic feel. But so in this case, as her, you can see she's kind of moving to her left. And that's when we want the head to drag to the right. And then same when she's moving to the right, we want her head to drag to the left. And we should just have one cycle there. We'll fix these keys. I guess I could have keyed it and moved my graph, but well, say lovey. All right, I'm going to play blast this because I think it's still going to be a little too much, at least on the up and down, but since it's a little chuggy, it's kind of hard for me to tell. It's actually not bad. Okay, I might leave that. So then just one little bit on her rotate Z, or Z as my friendly Canadians would say. We'll do a little bit there. Was probably too much. Whoop. And a little bit there. Kind of the same timing as the Y rotation, but all right. There we go. Yeah, not too bad. Let's take one quick look at it from the side as well. Yeah, I feel like that's an appropriate amount of head bob. It still might be a little more than a real person would do, but that's okay. So one last thing I wanted to add, I think, to her torso animation is, I think, gosh, I don't really like where that's rotating from. I want to add a little, you know, forward rotation in her spine to kind of loosen her up. I just need to find the right control that I want to do that on. Well, I'm going to give it a try and see how it looks real quick. Okay, so there you go. I added a little bit of rotation in her chest forward and backwards to give a little bit more natural feel. You may notice that it kind of seems like her head is still kind of going like this, and I think the solution to that is actually going to be to put the head on an animation layer and animate on top of what we see here, because sometimes what happens when you change the world space like that is it's gonna kind of act like an IK head, and so it's not always as simple as just moving the keys around. So that's probably something I'm gonna try and throw on a layer once we get to our polish and like variance stage later on. Okay, but that is looking pretty good, I think. So I'm just going to do the same thing that I did at the end of the last video and copy and paste those keys over, and we'll see what that looks like. Alright guys, this is the result of copying and pasting those keys over, and I think it's feeling pretty good. Obviously, one of the problems with being an animator or an artist is you're always looking at your work and you're like, oh man, there's so many things I want to change. But for now, we are going to call that good, and in the next episode, we're going to move on to our final touches, such as animating the fingers, probably doing a little bit of hair animation, like maybe giving her a blink or something, and then I'm going to show you what I like to do to add variance to a walk cycle if it's something that you're allowed to do in whatever game or project you're working on, where you can extend your cycle and then put everything on a layer, and then you just add some variance, like maybe a head turning slightly more one way than the other, or looking or blinking, and it'll like add something on top of it. Anyway, that is going to be for next episode. So that is all for today. Thank you so much for joining me, everyone, and until next time, stay foxy.